Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Morning again. Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. We use this opportunity to introduce ourselves to each other. My name is Howard.
Stephen.
George.
Jim. Bob.
Aaron.
Richard.
Jay.
Michael.
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 Larry. Jack.
Peter.
Nabu.
Paul. Jim. Christopher. Steve.
Bob. Bill. Rule.
Lenny.
Anyone here for the first time? Your name again?
Richard.
Richard, welcome. From where?
San Francisco.
Tough drive. And I have the privilege of saying Happy New Year to you. Welcome. And also to introduce our Dharma teacher this day, Jim Wilson, a friend of all of us here at Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Jim was the former abbot of the Chogye Zen Center in New York City. He has studied the Chogye and Fuke and Soto traditions of Zen. And currently he leads a weekly Sutra Salon in Sebastopol. And for many years, on a monthly basis, Jim has been our teacher, a teacher in our midst. So it's always a privilege, Jim, to welcome you back.
Thank you. Well, I'm honored to be here on the first day of 2006. Happy New Year to everybody. May this year bring much wisdom and compassion to all of us. I'm going to begin with some music. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. What I'd like to do now is for everyone to participate in a very simple sonic meditation. Okay? So it's simply chanting the syllable ah. And so deep breath, exhale, chant the syllable ah. Don't worry about being in harmony or coming in at the same time or anything like that. We're just chanting the syllable ah. And we'll do that for maybe about 5 minutes. Okay? So I'll start it by ringing the bell and I'll end it by ringing the bell. Okay? So. everything is just like this, just like that cloud of sound. Everything in existence is just like that cloud of sound. Very clear, very spacious. So understand that, and you enter the grotto of wisdom. Yeah? So you can find a place to dwell in the grotto of wisdom. Okay? So what do I mean when I say everything is just like this? Everything arises due to causes and conditions. Everything in existence arises due to supporting causes and conditions, just like that cloud of sound. Okay. So the cloud of sound arose because we were chanting. So we directly participated in the emergence of that cloud of sound. So it's very clear, see? We are the causes and conditions which gave rise to that cloud of sound. But everything in existence is like that. Everything. See? But we forget that, or we misunderstand that, or we misperceive that. So when I look at this bell, for example, I don't perceive the causes and conditions which gave rise to this bell. I can infer the causes and conditions gave rise to it, but I don't directly perceive the causes and conditions which gave rise to it. So this kind of meditation puts us in a situation where we can directly perceive what it means to say that all things depend on causes and conditions, because we are the causes and conditions. So I call this the gate of sound. This is the gate of sound. So everything is like, just like that cloud of sound. Rocks and streams and clouds and even Buddhas and Bodhisattvas arise due to causes and conditions. Yeah. So everything is like that. But because our perception of things is not always clear, we forget, that this is true. So that's why we need to practice, to remind ourselves, to give us a little, oh yes, that's right. Everything is like that cloud of sound. So, everything is like that cloud of sound also in that everything is impermanent. See? So I rang the bell, we stopped chanting, and the cloud of sound ceased. See? Everything is like that. So once again, we kind of forget that. And once again, it's because our perception of things is a little skewed. So our perception of things is not so clear. So when I woke up this morning and I looked at my desk, that desk seemed to be the same desk that was there yesterday. Now, I know from my education that the desk has changed, since I last saw it. I can infer that, but I don't directly perceive it. So that's what I mean where our perception is a little skew, or a little rough. Our perception isn't very subtle. So when we are participating in that meditation, it's very clear that cloud of sound is constantly changing and impermanent. It's sort of shifted gears, change and permanence, roughly the same thing. Change and impermanence, change and impermanence. Everything is constantly changing like that cloud of sound. Everything is impermanent like that cloud of sound. The sonic realm, the gate of sound, is very clear. Very clear. If you hear a teaching of the Buddha and you try and figure out what it means, if you shift your attention to the world of sound, it often becomes much clearer. So you can use sound as a template for other things as well. The visual realm is kind of coarse. It's not our perception of visual things is coarse. Not as clear. It's more difficult for us to believe that everything is constantly changing, that everything is impermanent, that everything arises due to causes and conditions if we just look at the visual realm. Our perception of the visual realm doesn't seem to support those insights. But our perception of the sonic realm does very clearly support that understanding. So So that's why I call it the gate of sound. So I offer you the gate of sound here, kind of like in this year of 2006. So, any questions or comments? Yeah, all very clear. Clear as a bell. Yeah. Or questions about Buddhist practice in general, or understanding.
Can you explain a little bit more about what are the conditions or the sets of events that create bodhisattvas of hearing?
Well, there's that's a good question. Classically there are a few standard ones. Is that you need to have the condition of the Dharma being present in the world, because that's a condition for the awakening of the bodhisattva direction. And you need to be born. You need to have a precious human birth, in order to open the gate of the bodhisattva. Other realms of existence, it's not impossible, but it's much, much more difficult for other kinds of beings to access this wisdom and compassion than it is for human beings. So for animals are dominated by fear. Don't think domestic animals, think animals in the wild. Domestic animals are a different trip. Animals in the wild are dominated by who's going to eat me next. And because the animal consciousness is so completely wrapped up in that, there's very little time or room for spiritual work. There are interesting stories in the Buddhist traditions about animals who awaken, but it's very difficult, extremely rare. Beings in the hell realm are dominated by fury, so their consciousness is dominated by fury. So from our own experience, when we are extremely angry, it is very difficult for the mind to settle and enter into wisdom and compassion, when one is in a state of fury. And beings who dwell in celestial realms are usually deluded into thinking that they are immortal. And because they believe they are immortal, they do not believe there is any consequences for their actions. So that is to say, they can get away with whatever they do. So the best example for Westerners of that would be the Greek gods, who were often behaved in ways that were mischievous at best and very damaging to many people at worst. And that's because they believe that they are immortal. So one of the Buddha's insights was that celestial beings, gods, goddesses, all that sort of things, are also impermanent. So the human realm is an auspicious human birth because we live a short enough time so that the understanding of impermanence can break through. We have enough leisure to take advantage of that insight, and we don't live such a short time that we can't do something about it. Once we have that insight. So there's the being born where the Dharma is present, having an auspicious birth so that one can have certain insights, and then has the time and the leisure to take advantage of those. So those are, generally speaking, the causes and conditions which would give rise to that kind of awakening. Welcome. Other questions or comments?
I still have trouble with the whole concept of diligence, application, action, virya, because it seems that the path to awareness for me is always sort of some kind of samadhi. It's relaxing, it's rapture, it's concentration. But it's always sort of detached, and then to sort of come out of that state and be energetic and still aware is very hard. I can be very energetic if I'm frightened, if I'm at work and I demand something, if somebody sexually interesting comes by, effort is produced, but it's not wise effort. It's not. I was just wondering, is there a practice or is there a path for integrating those? Some kind of feedback loop where the perspective or the balance of samadhi then becomes incorporated into the action and vice versa.
Foundation for virya is awakening to the beauty of the Dharma. Okay? So when you see that the Dharma is lovely in the beginning, lovely in the middle, lovely at its conclusion, then virya naturally arises. Okay? So it becomes attractive in the way that you were describing other things that are attractive give rise to virya, like a diligent application. So how do you discover that the Dharma is lovely in the beginning, lovely in the middle, lovely in the end? The way you discover that, I would suggest, is by going back to the very basic teachings. Don't get lost in refined elaborations such as Abhidhamma or Abhidharma, or the tenet systems which evolved in Mahayana Buddhism. All of those have their place, but they are not a good foundation for virya. I'm not saying that they're they're not valuable. But in order to build a foundation for energy, and that sense of I get to study the Dharma. That kind of feeling. I recommend returning to the very basic teachings of the Buddha, such as the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination in particular, those two. The Four Noble Truths, for example, take the Fourth Noble Truth of the path. There is unbounded insight in those. And how it all fits and works together is something of great beauty. Virya is actually one of the perfections, so the 6 perfections would be another basic teaching. But when you take the 6 perfections, try and integrate them into the Four Noble Truths and see how they weave together, because the fabric that comes that you will observe when you weave these doctrines together is of great splendor. The difficulty, particularly for those of us who have not grown up in Buddhist culture, is that it often seems like the Dharma is in pieces.
It feels very compartmentalized.
Yeah, like that. There's, like the Four Noble Truths is over there, and the 6 perfections over there, and Samadhi is over there, and like the I don't know, the 5s. This is 18 that, 37 factors of enlightenment. For virya to come to arise, what you need to do is begin to weave or stitch these together to get like a full quilt. And in order to do that, sometimes you need to sort of put a break on reading yet another doctrine or yet another perspective, and instead go deeper into what you already understand. So the basic teachings of the Buddha, such as the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination, are endlessly rewarding. So there's no difficulty in diving into them. It isn't like you're going to reach the end of them and go, I'm done with the Four Noble Truths. That's taken care of. It's I call it unpacking the meaning of the Dharma. So you're given this doctrine. Think of it as like a briefcase, Four Noble Truths. You see. And so, like if you carried it around, so now you open it up, and it's like this magic briefcase because there's more in it that could possibly fit if you look at it from the outside. So it just keeps rewarding further investigation. So, for example, take the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. Okay. So, if you just take that blank truth, the truth of suffering, that's valuable. Like in and of itself. Like that there is suffering in the world, that suffering exists. Like so. And then, when the Buddha was asked about suffering, he said, well, what do you mean, by dukkha, suffering? Like he said, birth is suffering, old age is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering. Not getting what you want is suffering. Being separated from those you hold dear is suffering. Being around those you dislike is suffering. The 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. So you can take each one of those and explore that. Like, why is birth suffering? What do you mean by that? Like, why is old age suffering? Like, why is being around those I dislike suffering? I mean, it may seem obvious that it is, but why is it so? Why does that give rise to suffering? And then the final one that he lists, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging is suffering, is like this great gate. Once you get that last one, many, many pieces of the Dharma will fall in place, and virya will arise. Oh, that's what he meant. That is really, that's beautiful. That's really lovely. So it's that sense of beauty, like that, so that the Dharma is no longer just like an abstract system, or a set of dogmas that I'm, learning and memorizing. So, and then the Dharma takes on a certain life, like a certain vividness. So that would be my, recommendation on that. Sure. Other questions, comments?
Well, could you recommend the book to read?
Oh, there's so many good books.
I know. You recommended Sharon Salzberg's book on loving kindness.
Yes.
And I love that book.
Yeah.
But if I was going to read the 5 aggregates.
Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, is an excellent introduction to the basic core ideas. The word doctrine in English is sort of a dicey word because it tends to have a sense of rigidity about it. But the actual word in Sanskrit would be view, the core views. So you think of, if you understand what the Buddha meant by view, then studying these basic ideas can be profoundly liberative. In this sense, suppose that you thought that the earth was flat. That was your view. It would constrain and what you thought was possible. It would constrain your view of the whole universe. And then somebody came along to you and reformed that view and said, well, actually, the earth is round. If you were willing to listen to them and be convinced by them, it would shift your view of the nature of existence. So what I'm suggesting is that the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination, those views have the power to shift one's understanding in a way that is even much greater than the example I just gave. They have a way, the possibility of transformation, so that one begins to understand that one is dwelling in a situation that is quite different than one thought, and much more beautiful. So I often recommend Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching. Thich Nhat Hanh has studied, taught in the West for so many years. He's very clear about both the strengths and the weaknesses of Westerners as they approach the Dharma. So that you really get the feeling in that book that he's sort of holding you by the hand, and saying, now we're going to do, this one, but don't worry, it's not that difficult. So that I offer that one. There are quite a few good introductory books, but that's one I consistently recommend. The other virtue of Thich Nhat Hanh in his presentation of teachings is that he's one of the very few teachers who has an actual knowledge, both in terms of practice and study, of both the Theravada, the Sebastapol, and the Mahayana traditions. And that informs his presentation. So you get a very, very broad basis of understanding that you can take with you when you go to more specific lineages and teachers. Other questions? Observations?
As I was driving here, there's a billboard, like in Nolan Valley somewhere, and it said there's no such thing as a waste of time. And my impression was, wow, that sounds real Buddhist to me. Does that sound real Buddhist to you?
I don't know. That's an interesting. Does it sound Buddhist to me? These days, everything sounds Buddhist to me. After all these years, but I guess the way I would look at it, Dad, is that you can learn from every moment of your life. That every moment of can be food for awakening and growth. So in that sense, if you look at it that way, yeah, that makes sense to me.
But I guess one of my ideas is that causes and conditions arise out of, the way we think about things or frame things or define things, which causes a lot of suffering. Just the whole term waste is just, loaded with neuroses and definitions that are taught by parents.
Yeah, it's my view that all sentient beings will eventually become Buddhas. But I have a very long-range view of that. I'm talking eons and eons, world systems, not just I'm talking about this entire cosmos collapsing and and other cosmos emerging, that sense of time. So there is a sense in which I sometimes feel that people have wasted their life in that they have seemed to have cultivated anger, ill will, hostility, and those aspects of human existence, and seem to have been unaware of the possibility of cultivating wisdom and compassion. But that's my very limited perspective. So, and from my own experience, when I look back, when I've expressed ill will and anger and ignorance, that has been fodder for fuel for my own understanding later. So hopefully that is what will happen in those cases as well.
I just been thinking this morning, and I have no idea if it has to do exactly with Buddhism or not, but there was a Discovery Channel program yesterday on the tsunami, and it talked to some of the survivors, and I was very impressed. I just wanted to share a couple of them. There was this one young man, maybe looked like he's about 20, and the whole village had been wiped out, like of 1,000 people, his whole family and everything. Maybe he was one of the few survivors. And so they asked him what did he make of all this? That's what they were asking the survivors, what did they make of all this? And he said, well, I think that I am here to make sure that the traditions of my village are relearned. And it was very touching. It was very touching because I was just very aware of how, capitalism is wiping out traditions, and this guy, he saw a real meaning for his life despite losing all his family and the whole village. And they went to an island off the Indian coast where only 10 people died, and these were very primitive people. And he said, well, we know there's a constant war between the land and the water for boundaries. And I guess when the tide receded, they knew that there was a big war going on, and so they took shelter. And it was just amazing, They were just very in touch with what was going on. And then they talked to another man in Sri Lanka, and he was really traumatized. He was still crying every night. But he said, and he lost his son. That was his biggest loss. And he said, but I know that it's my karma. And even though he was traumatized and suffering, there was something in him that made him understand on some level, or be able to hold the catastrophe on some level. And I realized that there are a lot of Christians whose faith is really holding them in terms of Hurricane Katrina. So I don't really separate, like that, because I don't see how people survive Katrina and are still surviving other losses there. But it was very touching to see an Asian way of doing it. So I just felt like sharing that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. The tsunami is a great lesson in impermanence. So last, I can't remember what month it was. It must have been October. I was in Denmark, leading a retreat in Denmark, and the subject of the tsunami came up because there were a lot of Danes and Swedes, in Thailand. So it is, the understanding of impermanence is critical to propelling oneself on the spiritual path. So that it's not, some people die young, some people die old. Many people will pass this very day. And so it's really good to contemplate impermanence. But the thing is that impermanence tends to bring up feelings of anxiety, and feelings of, oh yuck, and so one of the things about contemplating sound, to bring it back to that sonic contemplation, is that in that situation, we are not disturbed by impermanence. So what I'm suggesting is that you can use this as a template or a foundation for approaching impermanence. That impermanence does not necessarily have to bring up that sense of anxiety and dread. So when you hear the sound of a bell and the sound of a bell comes to an end, there's not that feeling of, couldn't the bell just last a little longer? Why does it have to fade away? So, we have what is called equanimity with regard to the sound, the cessation of the sound of the bell, or the cessation of the cloud of sound. So if you want to know what Buddhism means by equanimity, that's what it means. That state of mind you have when the bell ceases, and you are completely okay with that. That's equanimity. Now imagine if you could relate to all phenomena with that same sense of equanimity, with that same sense of clarity, instead of a sense of dread. So using that as a foundation, when I say using that as a foundation, what I'm talking about is recognition. Okay? So, that's what equanimity means. Now I know. It's not just an abstract. I've experienced what the Buddha meant by equanimity. I may not have experienced it to the extent that Shakyamuni experienced equanimity, but I have experienced. I know what he means. He means that state of mind when the bell ceases to ring. Got it. So, on the foundation of that recognition, it is possible to expand one's relationship to the world, to build upon that, so that gradually that sense of equanimity can be present in all situations, even in a tsunami. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but it is possible, because the seed of that kind of consciousness is present. And you know that the seed of that kind of consciousness is present because there are specific examples that you can recognize. So that's another aspect of what I call the gate of sound, which can be very helpful to us. So, equanimity is the fourth of the four immeasurables, that the Buddha taught. Immeasurable love, compassion, immeasurable sympathy, and immeasurable equanimity. So, on that sense of equanimity, there's enough space in one's mind and heart for love and compassion to completely flourish. When one's mind is consumed by fear and dread, then love and compassion is very difficult for them to manifest. So that's the connection, between equanimity and the Bodhisattva way, or awakening to compassion and love. That's why equanimity is there as the fourth immeasurable.
This gate of sound thing is a new idea for me, and I'm thinking, I'd like to try this. Are there like programmed sounds, like CDs, that you can listen to, or should you just pay attention like to the random sounds you hear when you sit?
Well, when you say, I don't want to interfere with your meditation program, like if you're doing Vipassana.
I don't really have a program. I mean, I sit.
Okay, but are you under the guidance of a particular teacher?
No.
Okay. So there are a number of sonic meditations you can do on your own. One is literally the sound of a bell. So if you take a bell and you ring it, and then you wait for it to come to a conclusion, and then you ring it again. I did this for 2 years, 108 times. Depending on the size of the bell, that will affect the time, the duration of it. Or you can do that bell contemplation for a certain amount of time. You don't have to do it 108.
Right.
You can work with that. The point is that the sound of the bell becomes your object of concentration. Okay. So when your mind wanders, you bring it back to the sound of the bell. So the sound of the bell becomes the object of concentration, and the contemplation is concluded with that all things resemble the sound of a bell. I will remember that all things resemble the sound of a bell. That's how you bring that understanding into outside of the sonic realm and into the world in general. So that's one. Another sonic contemplation is, just as you suggested, simply listening to the arising and disappearing of sounds. In the arising and disappearing itself becomes the object of meditation. This is outlined in the Shurangama Sutra. The Shurangama Sutra contains, I think it's 52 forms of meditation. And it goes through all of them, and the last one is this sonic meditation. And then it says, and this is the best gate for realization. This is the best one. This is the cleanest, niftiest, cleanest, clearest, So it's interesting, like about the sonic realm. In the Abhidhamma, Buddhist psychology, it details in very, very meticulously why that is the case. And says, if the primary cause of suffering is clinging, which is what the Buddha said, so clinging and grasping give rise to suffering. What's useful to note is that clinging and grasping are not equally distributed over all of our sensory experiences. Okay? So if they were equally distributed over all of our sensory experiences, it would be very difficult to understand what non-clinging means. Because you wouldn't have, like a greater and lesser example, to contrast with each other. For example, if we grasped onto sounds with the same relentlessness that we do to visual objects and mental objects, there would be no way of contrasting, that function. So if you take the six sensory fields, in terms of grasping, the two strongest ones are the visual and the mental realm. So in the visual realm, people tend to grasp onto things because, as I explained earlier, visual appearances do not exhibit their transient nature very clearly. So there's a tendency to grasp onto them. In contrast, even though mental objects are extremely ephemeral, the human beings are constructed in such a way that grasping onto mental objects is the most extreme of the six senses. So that is to say, grasping onto ideas and crystallizing a sense of self by grasping onto mental objects. That's the origin of the belief in itself. That's why a lot of Buddhist meditative practice focuses in on the mental realm. So you can say, for example, that Zazen is the meditation I described about the arising and disappearing of sounds. If you apply that to the mind, that's Zazen. So watch ideas appear and disappear, watch feelings appear and disappear. But the reason that's a difficult practice for most human beings is because our tendency to grasp onto ideas is very intense, really strong. And it probably is the most difficult to break through. But once you do break through that, then that spaciousness appears. There's a profound awakening will happen. Because we tend to not grasp onto sounds anyway. The value of meditating on the sonic realm is that it gives us a secure sense of recognition. So that when I apply that understanding to the mental realm, I know what it is I'm trying to accomplish. So many people, when they first begin Zen practice and some other practices that involve observing the mind stream, I know this was my own experience, is that I didn't understand what I was being asked to do. I understood that I was supposed to sit there in a certain posture, but I didn't understand what I was supposed to do with my mind. The instruction was very clear. Don't misunderstand me. Looking back on it, it was perfectly clear. But because I had no analogy to draw on, no what I call template to refer to, it was very confusing. When you first start practicing like Zazen, it's like 5 radio stations going to one. All this cacophony and noise and if you stick with it, it becomes clear. But the gate of sound gives you a sense of recognition. Oh, this is how I'm supposed to treat my ideas. This is how I'm supposed to treat that I don't have to grasp onto ideas just as I don't grasp onto the sound of a bell. Like I don't have to grasp onto my feelings. I can treat them the way I treat the sound of a bell. Making that kind of connection. Is that?
Yes, thank you very much. That's great.
We reached our time.
Okay.
I'm clinging to this responsibility.
All right. Well, okay.
Management of my suffering. But you will be available for conversation afterwards.
Sure.
There's an announcement, and then you can offer a gift. It's time for announcements with the Sangha.
I'm the host today. There's some little things to do out there. If you drink tea, please wash your cup afterwards and put it on the rack to dry. There's going to be a dana bowl going around. Suggested donation is $5 to $8 or more if you can, or less if you can't. And afterwards, people get together for lunch and tend to gather near the front door. Are there any new members today?
Richard is here.
I think that's it.
Next week is a steering committee meeting, and we invite everybody to come, and we need some new steering committee members, and the steering committee meets currently 4 times a year for an hour after this meeting. And so it doesn't require a big time commitment, but it's a core group that we have to run this place. So please consider volunteering, especially if you've come for a few years or you've got a little bit of knowledge of what goes on here. It isn't very complicated, so you're invited.
My name is Peter, and I am one of the hosts. And my allotted host slot is the 4th week of the odd number of months. So the 4th week of this month, the 22nd, would normally be my day to be host. But there's a retreat, which I think most of you have heard announced here, that David Holmes is running, and I will be away, as I believe you will, Howard, won't you? No?
No.
So I need to substitute with somebody or get a replacement for that day. I'm willing to make it up at some other point, but I can't be here if I'm there on the retreat. So I forgot. Are you the host coordinator now, Paul, or who is?
Kai is.
Okay. He's not here today, right? Okay. Well, maybe I'll send him an email and see if there's anybody who wants to try it one time just to see what it's like. I'd be happy to tell you what you need to do. It's not very complicated. Otherwise, I'll try and switch off to somebody who's already wearing the yoke.
Thank you.
We're having my name's Darren, and we have every month, the second Sunday, we have a little meditation study group that meets before this meeting. So next week, the 8th, we'll meet at 9:45. People are interested in kind of deepening their meditation practice, and we're going to focus on metta meditation next week. So join us.
And let's stand and take one another's hand.
Whatever merit we have earned since beginning this time, we do hereby freely offer this merit to all sentient existence. Whatever merit we have earned from this morning's gathering, we do hereby freely offer this merit to all sentient existence. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.